Hello everyone, this is Rabbi Ari Sachs of Congregation Beth Mordechai coming to you with another edition of this week's online Parashah class. This week we're going to be focusing on Parashat Nitzavim, which is the first Torah portion of this week's double Torah portion of Nitzavim-Vayelekh. But because we're only focusing on the first third, then we're actually only going to be looking at the first part of the first Torah portion of this double parsha, which is Parashat Nitzavim. And what stands out in this Torah portion is the idea of Moses telling the Israelites that you are standing here about to make a covenant with God, and specifically the language of koret habrit, that literally that you shall cut a covenant. And that idea of koret, of cutting, seems to make sense in terms of an actual covenant, in this so far as that the act of signifying that you are part of the covenant, that you are part of what eventually will become the Jewish people, but now are the Israelites, is cutting the foreskin of the act of circumcision. So that in this idea that it's a very powerful metaphor for what it really means to become a part of a people, that you are actually cutting a part of you off, and that you are creating this sign that you are a part of the people. And I raise that because at the very beginning of our Torah portion, Moses speaks to all of the different peoples who are connected to the Israelites, who are part of the Israelites, in regards to what it means for them to stand there at that day, accepting covenant with God. And so we turn now to the actual text of this week's parsha. We are in chapter 29 of the book of Deuteronomy, the book of Devarim, verse 9. Atem nitzavim hayom kulechem, that all of you shall stand here together, lifnei Adonai Elohechem, before Adonai your God. And who are the ones who are standing before God? Rashechem, Shiftechem, that your leaders, the leaders of your tribes, Ziknechem, your elders, Vishotrechem, and your officers, Kol Ish Yisrael, all of the men of the Israelites. Now, if we stopped it there, you might think that at that point it's referring to only those who are actually involved in the process of decision making, of those who have the power in the tribes. It's the leaders, it's all the men. However, the actual text continues and says it's not just the men who are standing here making this covenant with God. In fact, it's the rest of the people as well. Tapechem, your little ones, Neshechem, and your women as well, your wives, Vegercha asher bekerev machanecha, and the strangers who dwell within the midst of your camp. Now, how the Torah understands this term of strangers is something we're going to get into in a moment. But I first want to just make sure that it's clear that if we looked at only the very first verse when it was talking about all the men and the leaders, that's actually not who this covenant is limited to. Rather, we need the second verse to say it's for everyone. It's for your children. It's for the women who, in this patriarchal society, did not have the same rights as men did, and also the strangers. Now, in contemporary Judaism, we understand the term ger to actually be a term used for conversion, meaning that the actual act of converting to Judaism is a process of hitgayerut, literally that you are turning yourself into this quote-unquote stranger in the midst of the people. And that conversion into the people has the same connotation of also being a stranger from the people. Because ger, as it was translated here, and it seemingly translated in other parts, has a connotation of being strange to the actual people with whom you're connected, and yet also connected to the people. So is a stranger someone who is a part of the people, or is a stranger someone who is not a part of the people? And the process of conversion, which is a much more recent invention, seemingly only since the time of the rabbis in the past couple of thousand years, not necessarily in the case of the Bible, that the process of conversion where someone starts as one, whether you are born to one religion and then literally converts to another religion, does not necessarily seem to be the case of the Torah. That one is considered to be a stranger if you're not born into the tribe, and there are processes by which you can attach yourself to the tribe, especially if you become a servant, which we're going to get to in a moment, but that the idea of actually converting into the tribe does not necessarily seem to exist at this current point in time. And we're about to actually read a commentary that seems to indicate this kind of flexible understanding of what it means to be a stranger with two different words. The term ger, as we just mentioned, a term used for conversion, but also a sense of a stranger in the Bible, and the term nochri, which literally has more of a sense of someone who is not Jewish, or someone potentially is often been used to refer to someone who is Christian or to a member of a different religion, in which case there is a major separation between someone who's nochri and someone who is a Yisraeli, who is Israel, and a ger is someone who kind of turns from one, a nochri, into someone who is at least closer to an Israelite. Yet because, again, the term ger has this connotation of both coming close but also of being strange, that it seems that there is perhaps a little fear of what this stranger can bring to the people. A little stranger danger, if you will, that the Israelites are perhaps a little bit wary of the strangers who become a part of the people, who become attached to the people, which is so important in light of the fact that in this particular text, in our Torah portion, it is declaring that all of those gerim, all of those, whether you want to call them strangers or perhaps proselytes, another kind of term for converts, excuse me just one moment, that all of those people are considered to be standing with the Israelites and accepting the covenant with God. That's a major step. That is a major move to say that these people are not necessarily just attached in an informal sense, that they're the people who work for you, the people who are around you, but rather that they belong with you in front of God, that they are part of you because they stand before God all together. Now, what's interesting here is that in our text, it says a specific role that these gerim play. So we're going to go back to our text for a moment. And it says, V'gercha asher bekerev machanecha mechotev eitzecha ad shoev meimecha. And the strangers, that's how I'm going to translate gerim for now on, but and your strangers who live within your midst, from the ones who are the woodchoppers, through the ones who draw and carry the water and carry your water. Now, when I first took a look at this description, it seemed to me kind of saying whether they are, the lowest of the low, the highest of the high, no matter what job they are, they're considered to be part of the strangers who stand before God. I.e., the terms water carriers and woodchoppers are seemingly indicating all the different kinds of roles that your strangers would play within your midst. So it's simply saying it's referring to all of them. But the terms chotev eitzecha of woodchoppers and sho'eb memecha are a little bit different, meaning that they refer to a couple of things that are very specific. And for that, I want to turn to another moment where Gerim are brought into question in terms of their loyalty to the Israelites, specifically in regards to Joshua. When Joshua was overtaking the land of Israel, he came across a number of different communities. And one of those communities that a couple of those communities, a couple of those nations he came across were very scared of the Israelites because they seemingly were winning every victory. And there was this one nation known as the Gibeonites or the Hivites, depending upon how they are described. The Gibeonites or the Hivites saw what was happening, and they made a pact with Joshua that they said to Joshua, "We are from a land far away. We do not belong in this land that you're trying to conquer. So please make a pact with us that you won't destroy us and that we will be there to serve you." Joshua, who doesn't know, just gained the lay of the land, sees these people who seem the way that they dress themselves as if they are from a land far away, says, "Fine, you can be Gerim, you can attach yourselves to us, and we won't destroy you at all, we won't overtake you," because he thought that they did not actually live in the land of Canaan. Little did he know until he found out later on that the Gibeonites actually did have territory in the land of Israel. And that is when Joshua became very incensed. And Joshua called for them, and he spoke unto them, saying, "Why have you deceived us, saying, we are very far from you, when you dwell among us? Now therefore, ve'ata arurim atem, now therefore you are cursed, and there shall never fail to be both of you bondmen, both hewers of wood and drawers of water, for the house of my God." In other words, that it seems that when it comes to the role that these Gibeonites, these Hivites are playing, that they will always, that when Joshua found out that they were Gerim, they were going to be cursed among the people, that there were always going to be these two roles, which are Chotev Eitzim, which are wood choppers, and Shoavei Maim, and water carriers, to bring to the Mizbeach, to bring to the temple, to bring to the tabernacle, which, by the way, that term of Mizbeach, that idea that they are performing these roles for the purpose of bringing it to the tabernacle, does not appear in our Torah reading. It only appears here in Joshua. So that these roles are seen to be the lowest of the low, because it belongs to those who tricked the Israelites into seeing that, who thought that they were from a different land. And the fact that they tricked the Israelites meant that the Israelites were going to curse them with these particular roles. Now, what's interesting about that, in terms of the fact that these roles now seem to indicate a low status, is that the commentator Panim Yafot, who is an 18th century commentator from Eastern Europe and from Poland and from Germany, he tries to understand these different roles. And first off, he plays on the idea that in one spot it says Mizbeach, it says they're going to be these roles for the tabernacle. In one instance in our Torah portion it does not. And he reads a different take into these particular roles that the Gerim play. And I think that his take actually has a lot to teach us about a certain understanding of who these strangers, these proselytes, these people on the borders were for the people, for the Israelites, for the Jewish people. And so we're now going to turn to The commentary by Panim Yafot. And following in the commentary down here in the English, so I will be going through the Hebrew. Mechotev atzecha ad shoev memecha. And this is upon our verse in our Torah portion, which says, whenever refers to the gerim, to the strangers, as those who are woodchoppers and those who carry water. Nir'eh mizeh shehaya hefresh bein hagerim keda'amrina biyavamot daf ayin tet amud aleph. That there seems to be a difference between the strangers as they are mentioned in our tractate Yevamot, shegazar alehem avdut bamizbeach uleid eda kedeita b'sefer Yehoshua. That there is a difference in terms of the decree that is given for those gerim, for those strangers who are there to serve the tabernacle, and for those who are to serve the people. Bamizbeach referring to serving the temple, the tabernacle, Ule Eda referring to serving the people. Because as we said, in Joshua it says that they're there to serve the temple, and in our case, in our Torah portion, it does not say that, seemingly that they are there to serve the people. Nir'eh shehachashuvim shebahem hayu lamizbeach. That it seems from this that there is a difference between the strangers who work for the temple and those who work for the people, that the ones who are more important, chashuvim, are the ones who serve the temple, who serve the tabernacle, and that hainu chotev etzim leme'aracha. And this refers specifically to the act of gathering wood for the altar, shehu avodah meshubachat l'shamayim. That this is an act of service that is praising the heavens. So, and then he goes on to refer to a specific moment in the Talmud, which indicates the particular holidays in which the people would be bringing the wood to the tabernacle, to the temple. No matter how much wood they had, it was just part of their job. And by the way, one thing that's very interesting that I think is that, of course, other nations, when it comes to their own worship, most likely had fires, most likely had wood that they brought to whatever temple they used to pray to their gods. And isn't it interesting that one of the roles that we're using, that the Panim Yafot is further articulating, but that is mentioned in the Bible, the particular role that is given to these strangers is a similar act that they might have been doing in their own communities, in their own temples. That is to say, on one hand, that perhaps the Bible and Panim Yafot is saying how they're now transitioning to whatever you're doing was false, or whatever we're doing is right, and so we're going to show you that by doing the same thing. Or you could look at another way, I think, and to say that this is what you know how to do, and we're going to allow you to be able to do the same thing for us. And perhaps for you to see that connection between what you believe and what you do and what we do and what we believe. So that there is, on one hand, it could be one that's more butting heads with the other, and the other one is to be a little bit more inclusive in regards to the fact that to show how the actions of one community is similar to those of another community. And especially because the Panim Yafot says that this is an act meshubach, this is a praiseworthy act because it's there to help the heavens. That in fact it seems that the Panim Yafot is saying that the gerim who get the opportunity to bring this wood see it as a great honor. Just imagine that. To be on the outskirts of a community and to be able to bring this wood to the altar of your new community, and to be put into that high place of being able to participate in the actual ritual of worshiping God. So that seems to be a very powerful act. That's a very praiseworthy act. The other one, the carrying of the water, Panim Yafot doesn't have necessarily high opinions of. As he says later on, V'hagerim hagarurim hayu shoavei mayim le'edah. And those more inferior strangers are ones who carry the water to the people. Ki ein mayim letzorach hazbach leklal. Because you don't need any water for the tabernacle, therefore that role was not designed to be given to the tabernacle. It was designed to be used for the people. Gam lichaora yifaleh ech kibel Moshe gerim. And this is also this differentiation between these strangers who have this most important job of giving wood to the tabernacle, and the lowly job of bringing water to the people. That idea, that separation between these two different kind of gerim, is also seen in light of how Moses accepted the gerim into the community. And this is a very important point in terms of understanding Panim Yafot's understanding of gerim. As it teaches us in Masechet Yevamot in the Talmud, De'eno ger ad sheyimol v'yitbo. There is no ger, there is no stranger, or there is no convert or proselyte, however we want to define this term, until he circumcises himself, sheyimol, v'yitbo, and that he dips himself in a ritual immersion, i.e. into a mikveh. By the way, these are the two things that are required for conversion nowadays. You need to be, if you're male, to be circumcised, and you need to go into the mikveh. And just remember back to our Torah portion of how it's referring to koret habrit, to cutting that covenant. And so it makes sense that the gerim who are mentioned in the Torah go through the same practice, the same ritual of becoming quote-unquote Jewish or Israelites by enacting that covenant through this conversion and through immersion in the mikveh. But then we have a very interesting story about, or interesting fact about this circumcision that would bring them into the community. Uva midbar lo malu, but in the desert they did not circumcise themselves, i.e. the strangers did not circumcise themselves. Im ken nochrim hayudas, because they didn't circumcise themselves when they were in the desert, that they were considered to be these nochrim. Again, the term nochrim, which nowadays is referring more to someone who is Christian or someone who is not Jewish, of a different religion, I think the Panim Yafot is referring to someone who is not yet a ger, which is more of a convert, more of someone who comes close to Judaism. This is someone who is separated from that Judaism. But why is it that? So let me back up for a second. So they do not convert themselves. They do not do circumcision in the desert. V'tzarich lomar shehayu gerim gerurim shehivtichu limol kesheyavo'u le'eretz Yisrael. That these are considered to be these inferior converts, but that they're going to promise to circumcise themselves in the land of Israel. But why can't they circumcise themselves in the midbar? What's with being in the desert that means it's impossible for them to circumcise themselves? Ach yesh lomar, but there are those who say, Af sheYisrael lo malu, even though the Israelites did not circumcise themselves, mipnei chashash sakana nefashot, because of the fear of danger to one's body, shelo nishba lahem ruach tzifonit, because of the fact that there was no blowing of the northeast of the northern wind. Now this is a fascinating teaching that comes from the Talmud about the fact that when the Israelites were going into the desert, or sorry, when the Israelites were traveling through the desert, there seems to have been no circumcision, because Joshua has to, later on in the Bible, has to go do a mass circumcision for all of the Israelites when they enter into the land. And the question is, why do you need a mass circumcision? Weren't they already circumcised? Well, yeah, the ones who were in Egypt, who came from Egypt, those were the ones who were circumcised, but not anyone who was born in the desert. Why, according to the Talmud? Because there was no ruach tzifronit. There was no northerly wind that blew. And it was said that the northerly wind is a wind that actually comforts, that heals an individual from any malady, from any sickness that they may be undergoing. Therefore, because of the danger of pikuach nefesh, and the Panim Yafot, which I cut out, there's a part that I cut out about how he describes how pikuach nefesh of protecting your body is such an important value that you can even uproot the laws of Shabbat to save yourself. Therefore, you should be able to save yourself from any sickness that might ensue if you circumcise yourself without a northerly wind. That because of pikuach nefesh, the Israelites did not do any circumcision in the desert. Therefore, they needed that mass circumcision in the land of Israel. Therefore, it seems that's the reason why the Gerim, why the strangers did not circumcise themselves in the desert, because like the Israelites, they were worried about the danger to their bodies without a northerly wind. This is where it gets really interesting from the Panim Yafot. V'zeh shayach beYisrael. But this concept of the fact that there is a fear for one's body, and that's why the Israelites did not circumcise themselves, that only was connected shayach beYisrael. It is only said in regards to the Israelites. Aval hanochrim sheba'u lehitgayer, but when it comes to these strangers who came to convert themselves, to become proselytes, hayu yecholin lehachnis atzman besafek sakana, that they needed to do this to themselves, i.e. to force themselves to be circumcised, even when there is danger to their bodies. Kidei sheyitzgayeru veyikayamu kol hamitzvot, in order for them to convert themselves and to accept all of these mitzvot. In other words, that the Israelites had the ability to wait until they got to the land of Israel to circumcise themselves. But what the Panim Yafot is saying is that there was no waiting period, there was no grace period given to these potential converts. They had to do it despite that danger. And as he goes on to say, ve'efshar, and it is possible, she'otan shemalu, that those who circumcise themselves in the desert during this time of danger, natan otam la'avodat hamizbeach v'chotev etzim l'maracha, they were given this holy, important task of serving the tabernacle by cutting the wood for the altar. Ve'otan shelo malu, but those who did not circumcise themselves in the desert, i.e. like the Israelites, but they were not given the grace period, hayu shoavei maim le'edah. They were the ones who were given the task of drawing water for the Israelites. So that the holiness of the work given to these Gerim was dependent upon not whether they are the same as the Israelites, whether they have the ability to be on the same level to do what the Israelites need, but that they go a step beyond. That they go to a level in which I'm going to put myself in danger, something the Israelites don't do, but I'm going to put myself in danger because I want to become a part of the people. They take that extra step in order to become closer to the people. And the very fact that they're given that the difference between who is a ger and who is not based upon, that you want something less or you want something more, but rather in regards to, do you want to be on the same level of the Israelites? We're not going to give you a great task. But if you show you want it more than the Israelites, then we'll give you a good task. It's almost to say that when one is a stranger and coming into a place that is new, coming in place to a community, that community seems to think, again based upon the Panim Yafot, that the stranger has to take a step beyond what they would be willing to take in order to simply be accepted as a significant member of that community. Otherwise, they're going to be on the low of the low. Apologize for a moment. And what is so significant about that when it comes to the upcoming high holidays is that this is a moment when, for many Jewish communities, including our own, we have an opportunity to welcome those into our community. Both those who don't necessarily affiliate, those who come on once in a while, and those who come very often. And that in our own minds, we have certain ways of defining those who come, whether they are strangers, whether they are members, whether they are outside of our community, or whether they are a part of our, community at all. And what I simply want the Panim Yafot to teach us in this moment is that we might, in our own minds, whether it's consciously or I think often unconsciously, think that someone who is coming into our congregation, into our communities, or perhaps we can expand this into say even to our own families, even to our own places of business, have to show a level of wanting something more than we would expect of ourselves. And we think that that's right, that someone who's coming in new should show something more than what we do. But what we have to remember, and what I think that, the Panim Yafot was speaking for his generation, don't think he's speaking for our generation, is that for those who are deciding to take a step in, especially to a place that they may not feel that comfortable, to a place that they may not generally be stepping into in another moment, that actual step is taking it to a level that is potentially higher than what we do. Meaning that when we step into a community that is our own, we already feel a sense of comfort. But when somebody who is a stranger, in whatever way do we define that, steps into our community, that actual step needs to be taken with much more concern, with feelings of I don't know what's going to happen, with trepidation, and that they have to go through more in order to simply do what we think comes naturally. And so perhaps we can take that as an example of the Panim Yafot's teaching, that they are taking that step a little bit more than what we would normally be doing, simply by coming in. And by the fact of them coming in, that means that then we have to raise them to a level whereby they're going to be the woodchoppers for the tabernacle. They're going to be given this task, they're going to be given this opportunity to have this high role, to be given this great opportunity to participate in the lives of our communities. And so my hope and my prayer for these high holidays is that we take this chance, we take these days to be able to welcome the strangers into our community, knowing that simply by taking the steps, they are taking a step that is much greater than what we would be taking. And by doing so, we welcome them in to enjoy what we have to offer, to find meaning in a community, in a group of people that has found such meaning in their own lives, and to participate in the life of the community in an equal manner and as to those who are already there. Because each of us together during these high holidays, Nitzavim Kulanu, we will all be standing there together before God, before tradition, and within the midst of our community. Take care and have a wonderful Shabbat. And if I won't have a chance to see you before the new year, take care and have a Shana Tova Umtuka. Have a wonderful and sweet new year. Bye-bye.